Welcome to the Run Out. I am your host, Neil Barrett. This week, I am joined by Adam Levy, and we are going all in on the NLL. If you don't know Adam, he is one of the best follows, hands down, in all of lacrosse on social media, but especially if you are looking for box and really NLL content, you will be hard-pressed to find someone better. He is a contributing writer at ilindoor.com, as well as the NLLPA.com and Lacrosse Culture Daily. On Lacrosse Culture Daily, he also hosts his own podcast called the Lacrosse Matrix Podcast, where he combines stats and storytelling to provide a new perspective on your favorite players, coaches, and teams. It's really great. If you are an NLL fan, you should be checking that out every week. He also runs a weekly pick'em called Preston's Picks, where you can find out if you are indeed smarter than a fifth grader, or in this case, Adam's son, Preston. You can sign up for that on officepooljunkie.com. Adam and I today talked about how he found his place in the game. He gives me some teams to look at as I try and pick an NLL team for the season, and he tells me who he thinks will win it all this year. So without any further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we are here with Adam Levy. How's it going, Adam?
It's going really well, and I have to say, great start pronouncing the last name correctly. I know that I had it in my Twitter bio, the pronunciation guide, so I'm glad that seems to be working, and so glad to be here, Neil. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because one of the first things that I wrote down for this was that I think I have maybe followed you for a while, but I think it's only really been in maybe the last 8 months to a year that we've sort of started interacting a lot more on Twitter. And I had never once actually clicked through. I just saw your tweets, I had never actually clicked through. And so when I was starting to prepare for this, I did click through and I saw that and I was like, oh man, I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Luckily, okay. I never had to actually say it out loud.
Everyone always, and it's a confusing name. There's Levi, there's Levy. Obviously, I get overshadowed all the time by Adam Levy from Maroon. So
yes,
I totally understand why people mispronounce it, and that's why I put that in there. Actually, just a quick little story. The reason why I did that is that when I first kind of broke onto the scene, I was covering the Vancouver Warriors, and I had gotten invited on to do some radio shows on Sportsnet out there. And a really good friend of mine, someone who I've known in this industry for a long time, I hadn't been pronouncing my last name for him. So the go-to for him was, I think it was Levi. And so at that point, since I was on a big radio station, I was like, okay, maybe I should put out some kind of little note so people know how to say it. Because it is a very understandable mistake.
Yeah. I feel like every time I've seen Levy, it's Levy, like Eugene Levy and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I'm glad that it's up there, because I definitely would have pronounced it incorrectly today. But I guess that kind of gets us into the first thing, which is, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, who are you and why are we here? I guess.
Yeah. So it's an interesting story, I would say, for myself. And you see this the more you get involved in the box lacrosse community. I'm sure you've seen it, Neil, and you've heard everyone knows each other. So many of these guys have played with each other since they were like some 3-4 years old. A lot of them played in college and junior. They were coached by some of these coaches and know the coaches for decades. It's a very tight-knit community, one that I didn't grow up in. I'm a New Yorker, right in the heart of New York City is where I grew up. And my dad was actually a field lacrosse player. He was an All-American lacrosse player at Division III Trinity College. I don't want to date my dad, but this was back in the 60s. And he was, at that time, they had a position called a crease defenseman, and that's who he was. He was a little bit pudgier then, athletic, but big. And he was the guy soaking up the shots, helping the goalie out. And so, yeah, he built his way up to All-American status. But my grandfather also had played at Hopkins and was the captain at Johns Hopkins. This was probably about a century ago now or something like that. So his name was Robert Levy. So you could probably look him up. He's somewhere in the Hopkins stratosphere somewhere online. So yeah, those are my connections to lacrosse, which I guess makes you ask the question, well, how did I get involved with box lacrosse? And so when it came to box lacrosse, I had kind of strayed away from field. And I know this might be controversial to say to a field lacrosse fan and to some of the field lacrosse audience here. But this was pre-shot clock and all these different rules to speed the game up. And it was just so slow for me. I mean, I was a teenager, and teenagers, they want fast and exciting and awesome, blah, blah, blah. And so, it was just a slow pace for me. I did grow up loving Hopkins. My dad and I would always watch the Final Four together. We would go down to Philadelphia for the tournaments. I went to Adelphi University as well. And so I got to see them compete on those championship weekends for the D2 titles. They didn't win when I was watching them, but they did make it to the finals one year. But yeah, so I had kind of strayed away from field lacrosse, but I had worked for a nonprofit in New York City that you may have heard of. Pat Kavanaugh actually has partnered with them, which is City Lax New York. Now, Eamon McEnany, a well-known name in the lacrosse space, is now the CEO of a City Lax. But prior to him joining, there was a guy named Matty Levine, who is still part of City Lax. He had created it as a nonprofit for kids to play lacrosse in the New York City area. He and my dad had played club lacrosse together. And my dad said when I was a teenager, why don't you intern for him, help him out? And so I did. And Matty actually knew the former commissioner of the National Lacrosse League, George Daniel. And Matty was like, oh, there's this professional league. Like, if you're interested, their offices are in New York, if you want to do that. And so that was about probably 10 years ago now. So I did that. It was a very interesting kind of foray into box lacrosse. I have to say that, again, as a teenager, I wasn't like, oh, I'm focused on my future, I want to do this. It was more like, oh, this is, I'm working, I'm adulting, I guess. This is kind of fun. But then I forgot about it after that summer internship. Then it turned out that at the time I had started dating a German girl or this is actually a few years later that I had started dating this German girl, and her visa was expiring, and we needed to, if we were going to stay together, we needed to leave the United States because she had to leave. So we were looking for a place to go where we could both work and speak in English, and Canada was the obvious choice. And so we moved to Vancouver together. And then when I moved to Vancouver, obviously box lacrosse is huge. It's one of the hotbeds of box lacrosse. And I needed a job. And so I had reached out, even though it was a few years later, to the NLL, just like a random email saying, hey, I don't know if anyone remembers me, but I used to intern for the NLL. I'd be really interested if you guys have any positions. And so they did. And it was for, I guess they called it video editing, kind of the highlight clips that you see on social media. I was doing that at the time when it was all done by hand and stuff like that. So that was really cool. And I did that for a few years, and then spots opened up. This was, again, they don't have beat writing positions anymore, but when they did have beat writing positions, some had opened up, and I was actually the beat writer for the Colorado Mammoth to start. But it was a weird situation because I wasn't in Colorado. I was kind of doing it remotely. But with phones and technology, I was able to do that. And then it just so happened that the beat writing position for the Vancouver Stealth, I believe they were still the Stealth the year I took over. But this amazing, incredible person named Gary Ahuja, who still actually works out at the Langley Event Center, one of the premier lacrosse venues out there in the suburbs, where the Langley Thunder play and where the Arena Lacrosse League West plays their games. He was leaving his position covering the Stealth/Warriors, and he had reached out to me because I had built up a little bit of a reputation, and he said, do you want this position? I said yes. So I was the beat writer for both teams at that time. And then Yeah. And then I kind of just started pitching feature stories, started, getting to know the guys a little bit more. And that kind of snowballed into, building up a reputation. I have to say, and I say it all the time, even continuously on my podcast, the Lacrosse Matrix podcast, that, without the mentorship and the friendship of guys like Teddy Jenner and Jake Elliott and Brad Challoner, those guys out in BC, those are all broadcasters and NLL analysts. A lot of those, actually all of those guys have their own podcasts still this day talking about the National Lacrosse League. Without those guys, I wouldn't be where I was. Gary as well. But yeah, worked my way up as a feature writer. Also, as you know, I've always done stat stuff. So literally, this was back when Tyson Geik, who was doing stuff with the Ottawa Black Bears / Riptide. He and Pat Gregoire and Ashley Docking had these shows that they would talk about stats. And I would just, randomly kind of, I guess, fanboy over their cool vibe. And I would just interact with them and send them little nuggets. And they were like, whoa, this is super cool. Send us more. And then I developed a good friendship with them. And Tyson had created this incredible project called Lacrosse Flash, which has produced so many great writers. Unfortunately, it no longer exists, but it really was an incredible thing for the sport of lacrosse. And now you have something similar called Lacrosse Culture Daily, run by Jonathan Donville, which I also actually contribute to now. But yeah, so that just kept snowballing into more opportunities, more things, more stories. And then I just, became, I guess, the lead writer of the NLL and kind of taken charge. And then last year, under the leadership of experienced media professionals like Joel Feld and Scott Turkin and other guys like that, people who had been at ESPN, CBS, who still work at the National Lacrosse League, got to do some really cool projects last year. The Elevate 28, I was at the stock market with Mark Riccio and Paul Rabel and Brett Frood, when that kind of was a big event, kind of turning the page towards the 2028 Olympics and signing that pact to grow the game. And so many other really cool projects. And of course, that led me to win Media Person of the Year, the Tom Borelli Award. And, then I parted ways with the National Lacrosse League. I felt it was time to kind of be a little bit more independent. Incredibly grateful for the opportunity and everything that has come of my time with the National Lacrosse League. And one day, if things work out, would love to collaborate again. So, that's I guess the shortest version, although that wasn't very short, but it's been a very interesting journey for me, and I'm incredibly grateful. And that's, I guess, how I'm here now.
Yeah, no, I love one of the things that I've learned in lacrosse is that just kind of getting in and just doing it will open the doors. Like you said, you meet people, you know people, and it'll open doors. So it's really cool. One thing I did not find anywhere. I know you just redid your Instagram page. I don't know if it had been there at some point or not, but did you ever actually play field or otherwise? Did you ever actually play, or was it just kind of involved?
So I had played for, Matty Levine, who was doing City Lax. He also had a program called Docs Lacrosse, which is still around in the New York City area. And I had played for them when I was a teenager. And it didn't go so well. I wasn't a tough kid, to say the least. I'm not a tough adult now. I'm very much a softie, but I love sports and I love that. And I think I vicariously live through it when I see it, because I can't do it myself. But I was at a tournament up in Connecticut, and I think it was, I forget exactly where it was, but I was up at a tournament in Connecticut, and I was playing against kids who were about 2 years older than I was, and I had been subbed in because I wasn't great. But I was trying to pick up a ground ball, and some massive kid ran over me, and it was 100 degrees outside, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this. This is, and I don't see the fun in this. So I just stuck to watching it, and when I got my sports management degree at Adelphi University, I realized that I also didn't want to be in sports business. So, I figured that, sports journalism was the way to go. It was probably the best decision ever. I'm all for people who are in, the business of wanting to make guys a lot of money, but I do understand also that my work and hopefully the work of a lot of journalists helps the sport and these athletes make more money, but I don't like to be directly involved with that. It just makes me uncomfortable, I feel. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, no shame whatsoever. I actually hearing that, I'm like, no, that was me. I loved the game. I loved playing, but I was small. I was not, like you said, I wasn't a tough kid. Like I loved the game and I wanted to be good in it. And I could have been better. I also didn't really want to work hard. I loved being in practice and I loved playing games. But like when I went home, I didn't then, keep my stick in my hand and go play wall ball and stuff. And so there were things I could have done. I could have been better, but realistically, my ceiling was going to be playing varsity lacrosse at my high school, which I did. And that was pretty much, I played club in college. So like, it's not, I didn't even have a realistic shot of doing a walk on at any kind of NCAA program or anything. So, and then similarly, just another thing that not going to necessarily resonate with the audience, although maybe it will some. I went back to school when I got out of the military, thinking that I wanted to become a lacrosse coach. And I visited with High Point University, Coach Torpy, spent time in their practices and everything, and was really convinced that that's what I was going to do. And about 6 months before graduating with that degree, I was like, no, this isn't what I want to do. I hated, because so much of it is not coaching. I loved coaching. I coached youth kids and I loved coaching, but so much of college coaching is not coaching. And recruiting always made me feel so dirty. Like even with the best intentions and with honest intentions, I always felt like a car salesman. I was trying to sell them something that wasn't necessarily in their best interest. And even if I said that to a kid, like, hey, you got to make the right decision for you. Again, even if I went into it with those honest intentions, I always felt like I was having to sell them and stuff. And so, yeah, so real similarly, I have a degree now that I'm like, I don't even remotely want to use this. So I resonate a lot with your story. So
yeah, I mean, look, everyone does things at their own pace, and if you don't mind me asking, first of all, thank you so much for your service. How long were you in the military for, and what was that experience like?
I was in the Air Force for 7 years. I joined. I thought I'm going to do my 4 years. I was just kind of in a nothingness place. I said I had played club lacrosse. I had gone to school and loved it, but I loved it too much, and I didn't go to class. And I didn't do. I just enjoyed myself, and so I ended up dropping out. And I was just kind of floating. And I got to a point where I was like, I got to do something. And the military just was the best of probably a bunch of not great options. I had no intention of joining the military prior to joining it. Then I thought, I'm going to do my 4 years. I'm going to get out. And right about the time it was time to make that decision about whether or not I was getting out, I was engaged, and we decided together, hey, I'll stay in. We'll have that stability, that paycheck, and so I did, and I re-enlisted for another 4, and that relationship ended. So great. But at 8, I was coming up again on whether or not to stay in or what to do. And I knew that 8's kind of the last decision you got to make, because at 10, just stay. Stay and retire and have that career. Cause I could have retired I was late to the military, and I could have retired at, I think, 42, no, I'm not yet 42, but I still would have had a lot of life left to live. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it's time. I wanted to be coaching. I was coaching in Mississippi at the time. I was coaching the only team in the state of Mississippi of youth team. I think there was 2 colleges in Mississippi that were playing Division II, I think. But we were the only youth team, and I had to go to Louisiana and Florida and Alabama and stuff to play teams. And so I was like, nah, I'm pretty sure I want to get out. And they said, hey, at 7 years, they actually, I think it was probably about 6.5. They came down and said, hey, we want you to cross train into network intel. And if you do that, your option is to either get out at your current enlistment or to cross train into this career field. And to even take that cross train, I would have had to add 2 years on because I had to go to another school and learn a new job and stuff. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to get out. And they came down. It was during the drawdown and said, okay, since you want to get out at 8, can we pay you essentially that year's salary to get out at 7? It ended up being 7. That was not an intentional number that they picked, but so I only did 7, although I did enlist for 8. And the experience was great. I learned a lot. I definitely matured, got a lot more disciplined. When I went back to school, of course, I went back to school at 30, so that's a little bit different anyway. But, I was able to kind of turn some things around in my own life. And I would never discourage anyone who's thinking about it from doing it. But ultimately, I hated being in the uniform every day. I hated being told where to live and how to cut my hair. And I just very much felt like I was in a box. So I loved a lot of it. And again, like I said, I would never discourage anyone from doing it. My sister is still active duty. So again, I would never discourage anyone from doing it. But yeah, it was time for me to get out. The only thing I really miss is the paycheck.
Right. Well, it sounds like you were at a point in your life where you really had the ability and the chance to take your life back into your own hands with the relationship, with the positioning. And so, that takes a strong-willed person and it's a bold decision to make. A lot of people don't take those risks or don't make those big shifts because of the what ifs or I don't know what's going to happen. So really good on you to kind of take those steps and do that. Because, I think that, what we're seeing in this age now, and I see it so much in my work and obviously, with your life path that, there's so many different avenues and ways that you can make things work. There's not that traditional standard anymore. Sure, that does work in many facets and in many positions, but there are many jobs now and ways to make a living at different times and in different ways where you don't have to go that route. And so, like you said, it's cool for me to hear that, and I think for the audience, obviously, to hear that there are different ways and different paths and, ways for not only people to find ways to be happy, but to be successful in the career of their choosing.
Yeah, now this is going to go slightly down a little rabbit hole, but after I graduated, I said I didn't know what to do because I had gone to school doing this one thing, and then I was like, no. So I ended up working at a group children's foster home, and one of my jobs was specifically to I worked in a thing called Youth in Transition, and it was about the kids that are like aging out of the system. When they hit 18 in North Carolina, where I was working, they do have a program where you can basically kind of sign up through 21, but you have to actively sign up. But we used to talk all the time about the disservice that we do to kids, not just in the system, but just across the board, and telling them that, a 4-year education is the only path forward for them. I worked in television for a few years as well. And that was a thing where almost nobody had a degree, and people were making at the higher ends were making six figures. My director of photography, she worked on our show for 6 months, and then the rest of the 6 months of a year before we came back for the next season, she just traveled the world. She was all over the place all the time. So and she was actually from Germany, which reminded me that what happened with the German friend. No, did it last?
No, it did not. Now I'm married to my beautiful Canadian wife, and now we have Preston. But it is, that was a decision because we had moved to Canada. I had never been to Canada before. I didn't really know that many people at the time that we parted ways. And I made a very clear decision that I was going to try and make my mark and survive on my own out there in Vancouver, instead of going back to New York, kind of my comfort zone and the States and stuff like that. And it was the best decision I ever made to spend an extended period of time out there. I wouldn't have everything that I have now in my personal life and professional life if I hadn't done that. Yeah, no, it's funny how those things work out. But before we continue down this rabbit hole, which I'm sure we could keep talking all day, we might as well get into the upcoming NLL season. And I guess the first question I have is, what are some stories that you think we should be paying attention to heading into this season? Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones, and I actually have a piece on Inside Lacrosse or IL Indoor, the box section of Inside Lacrosse coming out. It actually might have already been released since we started recording this. The latest on the Christian Del Bianco Calgary Roughnecks saga, which has not gone the way that really anyone has hoped it would, and that includes all the parties involved. So I spoke to Christian yesterday. I don't want to give away too much of what's in the article, so go check it out on IL Indoor. But yeah, that situation and the Calgary Roughnecks as a whole are such an intriguing storyline. They aren't going to have Christian Del Bianco. He wants out of Calgary. It's looking more and more like they're not going to have Tyler Pace. Hopefully they can work out some kind of contract deal, and he's been one of their elite goal scorers. They got rid of Jeff Cornwall. They got rid of Shane Simpson. They got rid of Zach Courier, and they brought back Curtis Dixon and Dane Doby. But you got rid of a very large core of your team that was part of the success of your championship team in 2019 when they won the NLL Cup. And so with those changes and everything, it's going to be very interesting to see how things kind of adapt and change there. Obviously, Josh Sanderson coming in as the new head coach last year, was it the year before? I can't even remember now. He's newer, and obviously that staff is trying to build its own identity. And so with all these changes, what are they going to look like? How are they going to be? It looks like Cam McLeod is going to be their goalie. He's a guy that hasn't had a lot of time in between the pipes. So how is he going to do? There's just so many questions. So that is one of the big storylines. Unfortunately, I have to say to Calgary Roughnecks fans, I don't think it's going to be a great year. But, I think that with all the changes that have been made, and I will say, to play devil's advocate for the Roughnecks, if with all these changes and all these new pieces coming in, and they do have some really good pieces that came in, Matthew Gauthier, part of the Panther City Lacrosse Club expansion, and so many others that have come in, give this team a little bit of time to see what they can do with their new look. Don't just say, we got to blow things up. Things have already kind of blown up. So now once you've done that, you got to have some leeway to say, well, what are we going to do now? So, don't, I would say, have some faith, see what's going to happen over the next few years. And it'll be interesting. Another story that I find interesting, and I just so happen to be wearing their team colors, just by coincidence, the Saskatchewan Rush have been building towards something where they think they can be great again. About 10 years ago, they were part of a mini dynasty, winning 3 championships in 4 years. And they were very successful. And the methodology that they used to build that team, building from the back, building young, being athletic, they've tried to emulate that again over the last few years. It hasn't panned out. They've been 8-10 each of the last 3 seasons, or at least have missed the playoffs. I might be wrong on those numbers in terms of win-loss, but missed the playoffs the last 3 years. That's unprecedented kind of for this organization. And Derek Keenan, who has now kind of been on the bench, off the bench mostly, but he's also the GM. He has a very high standard for what he expects of that organization, and now is the time. And if you look at the amazing talent, a lot of your audience of the college game and the field game should be excited about guys like Levi Anderson, who's a rookie coming in, Josh Zawada, another guy, a Duke guy coming in, Jake Nasso at the face-off X. There's a lot of young talent. You've got Ryan Keenan there. You've got Austin Shanks coming from Halifax, and actually I have him as my featured guest on my podcast, the Lacrosse Matrix podcast, coming out later today. Today being November 22nd, and so it's an exciting team, and they need to start getting at least to the playoffs this season. If things don't really look like they're panning out, that's definitely not what the team wants. And it might start to raise some more alarm bells, but, there has been a lot of changes. So again, as I would say, don't panic right away if things don't work out. But, this is a team who had a 5-year plan, and they're, I think, in year 4 of that plan. And so they do need to start turning things around. I would also say, it's very exciting to see the follow-up to a very exciting year for the Vancouver Warriors last season, having one of their best years in the last decade, and the excitement that's building in Rogers Arena around that team. Kurt Malosky, one of the greatest coaches this game has ever seen, and an incredible, incredible human being as well. A tough love guy is going to tell you how it is, but, he's always there for his players. I think I would say it's pretty fair to say he's probably one of the most beloved, if not the most beloved coach in the National Lacrosse League right now. Players just have an incredible amount of respect for him, as do I. It'll be very interesting to see what they do after a very improved season last year. And then, of course, Ottawa Black Bears, new franchise, new town, very exciting. Another year of Jeff Teat. So, there's so many storylines. I could go on and on and on. Those are the ones that come to mind, I think, that are the most intriguing to watch. Obviously, also, I should mention the Colorado Mammoth coming off a very subpar year, tied for the worst record in the league at 5-13 last year, but they've got Ryan Lee back, hopefully, fingers crossed, because he's had so many injuries, and he was so good when he was healthy, helping them to the championship in 2022. But now he's back, and they've got Will Malcolm, who's joining in now again from Panther City Lacrosse Club, the dispersal draft. They've got Eli McLaughlin still, Zed Williams, who the field audience will know. Just a really stacked offense. Plus, you got Dylan Ward in that. PLL fans obviously know him as well. Robert Hope anchoring the defense there still, even after about a decade's worth of service in this league, still one of the elite defenders. So I think they're going to have a bounce back year. And then just the more I talk about these teams, the Las Vegas Desert Dogs, I think, are going to be so exciting offensively. You've got Jonathan Donville now on that team with Jack Hanna and so many other guys, Sean Wesley, another young kid there. Really just going to be an exciting offense. Adam Poitras, who a lot of collegiate lacrosse fans know very well, he's coming into that club. So I think they're going to be surprising. And Sean Williams is the bench boss, another extraordinarily respected coach and smart mind in this league. With this dispersal draft and the loss of Panther City, as much as it does suck that happened, the amount that teams have gotten better across the board, you can see it in all the guys that have been released in the last month. Like the guys are getting released who you would have thought prior to that, they're like, this is insane. Why would you release that guy? But it just shows just how competitive it is to get on these rosters now. And I think you're going to see how exciting the NLL is because everyone is just so good.
Yeah. No, I was actually thinking when you were trying, because again, and we'll get into it. I'm not super in depth in the NLL, but just because I follow lacrosse as lacrosse as a whole. I know a lot of the names and big players that the PCLC dispersal draft, really did as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot, Will Malcolm and a lot of guys had been added to these rosters. So, for you mentioned Jake Naso, you mentioned, Dyson Williams, not Dyson, Josh Wada. And you didn't mention Dyson Williams and Brennan O'Neill. Yeah. My question to you, just personally as a Duke fan, who do you feel I should invest more of the Duke players that are out there? Who do you see having not necessarily the best year? Because I think Dyson Williams and or possibly Brennan O'Neill could blow up, but just overall, maybe their success, team success, just overall total picture. Who do you think as a Duke fan I should invest more into?
First of all, let me tease a couple of projects that I'm doing, or some stuff that I'm working on actually in relation to Brennan and as well as Dyson. I'm working on this really awesome mini documentary on what drives Dyson Williams. We've been doing this, me and these incredible media production people, Rich Owens and Eric Weber. Rich, actually, I met when he worked at the National Lacrosse League a few years ago. I've been working on this incredible mini doc about what drives Dyson, and was up in Albany, his first weekend in Albany, following him around and hearing his story. Obviously, we've all known about Dyson's story and the unfortunate things that his family has experienced with Tucker's passing. But I think that he is going to be an incredible talent, Dyson Williams, and I'm excited for people to see this mini doc when it comes out, to see just how much he is driven and how the family is driven by this unfortunate tragedy that they had to experience, obviously wearing number 51 in his honor. But I think Dyson's going to fit in brilliantly in Albany, and I think that, I was thinking about hot takes and who I would want as my rookie of the year, and I wanted to say someone that wasn't Dyson Williams, but I can't see it. Dyson, the thing is that for maybe guys like yourself or other field centric fans of lacrosse, Dyson is a box guy through and through. So if you think of that and think of the success and the coaches and all the experience he's had in box throughout his entire life, growing up with a Hall of Fame NLL player as a father, and then you pair that with what he was able to successfully do at Duke, becoming one of only 9 players in NCAA D1 history to surpass 200 goals and only the 3rd Canadian to ever do it. That should send alarm bells to anyone in the National Lacrosse League being like, okay, this guy is so serious. And the reality is that everyone has known that for a long time. Like I remember talking to a couple people and they're like, yeah, we knew Dyson Williams was going to be the number 1 pick in the NLL draft like 5, 7, 10 years ago. Like this guy is just so good. He's just born to do this, that Dyson was always going to be the guy. And I think that says all you need to know about, 1, his character, 2, the level of commitment he puts into his game. Dyson's going to be great. So my natural instinct would be Dyson. Now, I've talked a lot with some Rush guys, and the Rush have been very pleased with what they've seen from Jake Naso. And what his progression has been like at the face-off X. And if he can do what he's been doing in preseason, which I believe the number is winning 73% of his draws, no person in Rush history has ever won more than 60% of the draws during the season. Now, of course, he's not facing right now the Trevor Baptiste, the TD Erlins, the Joe Nardellas right now. But, if he's showing that type of potential in the preseason and then he gets those reps against some top quality guys, who's to say that he can't be winning high numbers over 60%, as an NLL guy. So that's exciting to hear. Now with Brennan, it's an interesting situation, and I'm actually talking with Brennan for an Inside Lacrosse article that's going to come out next week about what his experience has been like in training camp and how he's progressed from week one of camp through this entire month, obviously preparing for the San Diego Seals on November 30th in San Diego for his NLL debut. It'll be interesting because he's built for box. He's a big guy. Meeting him in person, his forearms are massive. The good thing is that as physically as intimidating as he looks, such a kind, gentle, nice guy, but physically built for box, strong. And, he's talked about obviously the different in movement, and so many guys have, and the confined spaces and how you adjust from field to box. But we've seen guys do it before, and it's when you're built the way he is and when you're driven the way he is, I think he's going to be very successful. Now, do I think he's going to be that breakout player in his rookie year? I don't think so. I think he's going to be solid, but I don't think he's going to be that, oh my goodness, I need to watch Brennan Williams, the box star, right away. I think it's going to take some time, and I think that's reasonable. He's played box previously, but he's not a box guy. Mm-hmm. He's a field guy. And, when he admits to the audience that there are things he needs to learn, there are things that he needs to adjust to, that's telling you, hey, I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. And so tempering the expectations of what that number one draft pick is going to be, I think is important, but I do think he's going to be an incredible talent, no doubt, in this NLL. And I guess that's my kind of breakdown of who to watch. So it's the two chalk picks, I guess you could say, but very exciting. And, talking to Dyson just quickly, about Brennan when I was with Dyson, the chemistry that they had at Duke and, the way that they pushed each other. One thing that was so incredible is that you see guys, especially on camera, being buddy and things like that, and they are very good friends. But what pushes someone to be great instead of just good is that these two guys, they were not afraid to be upfront with each other. If they needed one of them to work harder at the gym or do a certain thing on the field, they were not afraid to say it. And they pushed each other, and look at how that made them successful together at Duke. And that's the kind of mentality you need with your teammates. That's the kind of mentality you want, whether it's in the military or whoever, where you got your brother's back, but at the same time, it's like, hey, I need you to do this, or else we're not going to get it done. So the fact that they had that relationship and they can do that now on their separate teams in the NLL, I think is very exciting. Yeah.
No, reading and hearing all about, I'm like, man, this Duke team this year is going to be tough. I think we're missing so many people, but okay. So we got a little bit into Duke. I guess, as you and I have discussed on through social media and stuff, I have been around the NLL. I have watched games. I know some of kind of what's going on. I don't know maybe the nuance, some of the detail. For anyone who's like me, who's coming into this NLL season, trying to figure out what they're watching, figure out, pick a team, try and root for something this year. What are maybe three things that you would say to someone who's checking out the game, maybe for the first time, or even like me, I've seen games, I'm familiar with the game, but I'm really trying to absorb it this year.
Yeah. So I would say that, when you watch box, don't think about field lacrosse when you're watching a box game. They're very different. Yes, they are both versions of lacrosse, just as sixes is a different version of lacrosse. But, don't get it twisted. These are very different types of games, same guys. And so, I would say, first of all, it's good that you might have recognition of certain players from the PLL or the collegiate game. But what you're going to see from those guys will be different, and in some cases very different. There's a lot of guys that maybe were offensive guys, but teams feel like they're better built or have better skills to play defense. And so we've seen some guys who maybe were midfielders or whatever who don't just have that skill up front or are used more versatilely. Like if you look at face-off guys are that way. Trevor Baptiste plays a little bit of defense. Joe Nardella plays defense. Like if you're a face-off guy, there's no Fogos in the National Lacrosse League. And I know we were talking about this off air, but one of the things that's interesting is that you don't have everyone on the field or on the floor all the time. So you're switching out guys. It's very much like hockey in that sense, where they have different lines and they come on and come off, and you've got different roles that guys play. I think that's very exciting because there's a strategy to it. So like teams that are really good in transition, guys who can run off the floor on defense to allow those guys on offense to get out, or for the transition team to be able to pick up those loose balls, and then offensive guys have to get onto the floor. It's like a very intricate dance that's happening constantly, and it's happening at such a fast pace, and it's also happening in such a physical manner that it's just incredibly stimulating and exciting, and it is much different than the field game. And I'll admit, and I'm not going to say any names, but I know that there are field guys who I've not only spoken to, but I have heard from other people where, the box game is too much for them. It just doesn't fit their body type. It's too physical, especially if you're someone who's been prone to injuries. The physicality of box can wear you down and end your career way sooner than you'd like it to. So it's understandable that it's not for everyone, but it's a tough sport. It's very exciting. When trying to choose a team, I think that it's what do you want to look for? Do you want to look for where are the most notable guys? So let's say who has the most notable collegiate or PLL stars? That's obviously, I think, a go-to for people who don't know the NLL as well. I think another one would be, do you want to be a fan of a winner now? Are you, dare I say, a bandwagoner? And do you want to just hop on the team that's really successful? Or do you like the fact that there's a team that's building towards something and just has a character and a vibe around them that's really exciting? I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but if you want the winners right now, obviously the Buffalo Bandits and the Toronto Rock are probably your best bets. I would have thrown San Diego in there, but now they've undergone so many changes that who knows what they're going to be like. And again, that's just another team to keep your eye on. But then, if you look at the big names, obviously, I would say, if you're a Duke fan, obviously Philadelphia with Brennan O'Neill is exciting. Also, just because, the games are at the Wells Fargo Center, which is an incredible environment, a very amazing box culture with so many great teams there. So I would say that, as we've actually seen with the PLL, there's been such a movement with the Water Dogs. So many people, I feel, jumped on the bandwagon with them because of the market, because of the guys that they had, all those things. Obviously, it helped that Barstool really jumped on board with them as well. But, that's one team, Dyson Williams in Albany. So it really just depends what you're looking and trying to do or trying to prioritize in terms of picking a team. But then you've got other great guys. Vancouver's got Peyton Cormier there. If you're a Virginia fan, that's exciting. I would imagine also that new fans, they'd be more intrigued by the bigger arenas. So the Buffalo Bandits, best attendance by far, 16,000 people almost every single game. Incredible environment. It's really, really special. Bandit Land, it really feels like the most pro sports team that the NLL has. The Toronto Rock were kind of like that when they were playing out of, Scotiabank Arena, I believe it's called now, in Toronto, where the Raptors play. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. So there's one of those. Obviously, the Warriors play where the Canucks play at Rogers Arena, and that has a great environment as well. But if you want a smaller team, but also with a lot of collegiate talent that's very exciting, I'd give you a team like Rochester. Connor Fields is there. They've got Jake Pacino coming in, who collegiate field fans love. Graydon Hogg, another successful talent. So there's a lot of different ways you can go, a lot of different avenues that, if you're invested in watching a lot of box lacrosse, you can enjoy yourself. Now, Also, this gives me a quick chance to plug the new NLL Plus, and so it's free. If you want to go check out as many games as possible in the U.S., sure, they won't be live, but go back. You can go back at any time, watch the reruns, do that. Check out each stadium. If you're in the area, especially in the Western New York or Philadelphia area, go to a game, check it out, see what it's like. It's very affordable ticket prices, incredible environment. You'll love it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you talk about the crowd, because I was thinking when prepping for this that I'm a huge soccer fan. Manchester United is probably my number one favorite team. Period.
Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Okay,
what are you about to say?
I'm a Liverpool guy, but it's okay. It's okay. We'll get past it.
I don't know that we will. Our relationship is irrevocably damaged at this point. But like you said, we'll set it to the side for now. We'll maybe a different podcast that could be. But one of the things that got me was the crowds. That pop when a goal goes in. For most North American, however you want to view it, sports, that's not something that you see. In football, you watch a team drive down a field, like you can kind of see it coming. Yes, they have big plays, a 60-yard touchdown or something that kind of comes out of nowhere. But there's an element of seeing it coming. Basketball, it happens so frequently, scoring does that it's not a thing. That the closest is probably hockey, but that's of the four major sports, that's probably number 4, at least through most of my life it was, for sure. So that pop when a goal goes in, that was, I think, the thing that kind of got into my bloodstream and made me be like, oh, I need to see more of this. I need to get that feeling. And so crowds and stuff are a huge thing. And again, I don't know a ton about the NLL, but one of the games that I watched the entire thing of and was one of the things that made me go, okay, I need to get more into this, even though this was several years ago and it hasn't exactly happened. But that 2022 Game 3 final, not Chicago, Colorado and Buffalo, where Colorado won.
Yes.
I think they played the Bell Center. I think am I making that up? But either way, the
Ball Arena in Colorado.
Ball Arena. That game was crazy. If I could get that game, 126 times a year, I would have been all in. I don't know. As we sort of talked a little bit off air before we got on, I don't know what it is about it that hasn't fully grabbed me. That one game, whatever it is, overcame that, because I was all in. I was watching it. Dylan Ward was insane. I think it helped a little bit that I was really kind of rooting for the Bandits. Again, I'm a soccer fan, and I've had lots of friends that I've gotten into the game, and one of the things that I've learned is having a rooting interest is a major part of being a fandom. If you're trying to become a fan, having a team that you're kind of living and dying on their success on and off the field is is a really important part. So in that moment, I think that was definitely part of it, was that I was, Josh Byrne, Dane Smith, all those guys that I had known from the PLL and knew the Bandits and how good their fandom was, and how, at least in my mind, although correct me if I'm wrong, they won it, I guess, in the right around 2010. Is that right?
Which team?
The Bandits.
The Bandits had won, in 2008 was their previous championship before this back-to-back.
Yeah, so I think in my mind at the time that hadn't even happened, and it had been a fairly substantial time. So there was that kind of underdog-esque story, which is kind of crazy to think about them being as good as they were, and me thinking of them as an underdog, I guess. But yeah, there was something about that caught on, and I think, watching that packed stadium for game 3, and just they were so crazy. And then of course home team wins, which always kind of makes the atmosphere even a little bit better, even though I was actively going against it. But yeah, I that kind of made me wonder. I know you have some attachments, and you've probably gotten into some of this a little bit, but if you were getting into the NLL today with no attachments, let's even take out growing up, in New York around these things, who do you think would be your team? Obviously, we'll never really know, but who do you think you would pick?
That is a risky question to be asking me. Who would I pick? For me, based on my preference in major sports teams outside, and I would say, to be fair, interestingly, Liverpool is a very unconventional pick for me in terms of sports teams. I grew up a Yankee fan, and once I realized how powerful they were and how much money they had, I very much was turned off to the Yankees. That kind of gives you some idea about, when I was in sports management, why I didn't think that was for me. And so, it would have been a smaller market team probably. Now I love when a team can build from the draft, when you organically do something, and you create a positive culture. So if I look at teams who organically grew, I would say the Albany Firewolves are a really good choice. So many of those guys, I think, when you include Ethan Walker, Ty Kurtz, Alex Simmons, again, guys that field collegiate field audiences would know, from Delaware, from Denver. These guys are Ethan Walker from Denver as well. These are young guys who have found a way to be successful together, and that all came from the draft. So that's a very exciting thing. So, yes, I've spent a lot of time in Albany, but I love that. I love that, you're not just necessarily buying players or, selling them on an idea of a town or something like that. I mean, you got to respect what the Bandits have done. Like they drafted great. They've created an environment that teams our players want to go to, and that teams around the league envy. So, it's hard not to choose them as well. But then the other one, which is, I think an understandable soft spot, is that, when I was covering Vancouver, when I first started, things were not good, and they hadn't been good for a while. And that wasn't because they didn't try. There were a lot of really smart, talented people who tried to make something work. Some great coaches who were dealt some bad hands, bad timing, certain players who just didn't, weren't as successful as they hoped they would be. It was a rough time in Vancouver, and I know that so many guys would admit that. So to see what has changed there in the culture, and Kurt Malosky, and again, building from the draft, and finding guys that are successful. You look at even the story of Keegan Ball Hall, who I'm not sure if he was undrafted or if he was a 6th-round pick or something. I think he might have been undrafted and then was dropped by the Colorado Mammoth, and now he's one of the great scorers in the league. A phenomenal pickup when he joined a handful of years ago. So excited to see what Peyton Cormier is going to do. The growth and development of Adam Charlambides and the environment of Rogers Arena is very exciting. So I love that kind of organic growth. I love that, I've seen it go from something that was maybe not so enjoyable to watch and even be a part of, to now it's something that if you live in the Vancouver area, you want to go to Rogers Arena. You want to be part of the Vancouver Warriors environment. And that's just so incredibly infectious and exciting to see that happen. So those would probably be my go-tos.
Okay. Yeah. No, I've kind of blackballed a lot of the Western Coast teams just because I'm like, I'm not going to stay up late and watch these games. Yeah. I can't be as involved as I want to be. But I'm bummed about that because Vancouver's one, that Calgary was one. There's a few teams out there that I was like, a lot of kind of what they're doing, like you're saying, has aligned with me. So I'm having a little bit of trouble with that. Anyway, I know we're probably doubled the time that I think I said. So I've got, I think three questions. They should be a little bit quicker though. Sure. The first question was, after all this with everything that we talked about, who's your pick to win it all, and then maybe a dark horse that you think has a chance that maybe we're not talking about enough.
So I would say the team, and I said it last year for my IL indoor predictions, I thought Toronto Rock were going to get over that hurdle because they've been so successful in the regular season, and then it seems like they always have to face the Bandits in the playoffs, and then they always lose. I think that this is their year now, obviously. So Tom Schreiber finally back in training camp. Great to see. There was some concern to whether he'd be ready and how much time he would miss. Hopefully he doesn't miss game 1 on next Friday. But, even if he misses just one game, let's say, that's better than last year where he missed, I think, the first 5 games. He's obviously an instrumental part to the Toronto Rock offense. Missing TD Erlin now, it looks like that's going to be an extended injury. That's rough. However, as much of a data-driven guy as I am, apparently, according to the people who broke down the numbers, faceoffs don't really matter in terms of win-losses. So
it's a whole other question.
Yeah. Look, I think faceoffs matter because I think possessions matter. But that, you're right, is a whole nother story. But him being out, how will that affect the amount of chances the offense gets? Is there a notable drop-off while he's out? But I do still think with the lineup that they have, Latrell Harris coming back, an incredible talent. And the guy's only, it feels like he's been around forever because he came into the league at 18 years old. But he's only 26 years old, and he's so good. How does he come back from that ACL injury? I have high hopes for him, and I also have an Inside Lacrosse article coming out on him within the next week or so. So he's excited to get back, which is very exciting. I think the Rock do finally win the championship this year. They put in the wins and the effort and the time to do it, and it just feels like now something's got to give. So I would say them for the championship. And in terms of a dark horse, I wouldn't say that I think that there's really a dark horse that could win the championship. However, a dark horse that I think really could shake things up in terms of who's in the playoffs and what's going to happen. I would say it's got to be the Desert Dogs. I think with the amount of talent that they have offensively, and bringing in a guy like Shane Simpson and another year of development for Landon Kells in net, I think they're going to take a huge step up. I think that there's a lot of good that will come out of them. I guess if you wanted to throw a team in there that could win the championship, who are at least, again, who could play spoiler, the Rochester Nighthawks, I think, are a really good team. I think that'll be exciting. But yeah, I think it's either going to be the Bandits or the Rock once again. Maybe there'll be teams who try and get in the way, but those are the top teams in the NLL right now, in my opinion, across the board. And it'd be hard to see any other team winning the championship.
And what about MVP? That's kind of the last one I got over here.
MVP, that's a good question. You know what? It's so silly that it slipped my mind right away. I think Jeff Teat wins MVP. I think that the Black Bears are not going to win the championship this year. I think they will make the playoffs. And I think that because of that, and because of, I think, Jeff Teat, and I also think, not that this is necessarily a bold prediction, because he's had over 130 points in each of the last 2 seasons and only was like a couple points shy of the single season record the last 2 years. But I think he breaks the point record, and I think that the Black Bears make the playoffs, and I think he wins MVP. And again, he's done more than enough to deserve it. He's gone on against some really great talents in Dane Smith, Josh Burns, some other guys who have challenged him for MVP in the past. But I have to say, I think it's Jeff Teat's year.
So Jeff Teat could break the points record in the PLL, the NLL, and win MVP in both leagues all at the same time?
Yes, I think, and as extraordinary as that sounds, I think we can both admit it doesn't actually seem that extraordinary, because we know who Jeff Teat is. And, to be honest, I feel, and maybe not in the field game, and hopefully I'm wrong, but NLL wise, I think that we're going to be having Dyson Williams in the same conversation in the years to come. And I think even this year, like he could easily break Alex Simmons's team rookie record, and will challenge Jeff Teat's rookie points record as well. I think with the roster that they have and him fitting in, he's just going to have a phenomenal year.
Yeah. Jeez, that's nuts. And I think it's funny that like you said, it sounds like a crazy thing to think that a person, but then if you've watched Jeff Teat, you're like, oh yeah, that's not even, it doesn't even feel like a crazy prediction. It's not like you said, it's not that bold of a statement to make. He's been right there already. So, yeah, that's kind of it. I guess the last thing is just, where can people find you?
Oh, so many places. Actually, I spent most of yesterday expanding my reach. So
I saw.
You can mostly find me at Adam Levy Lax, LAX, on Twitter. I have all kinds of nuggets, and I share all my articles there. I write for IL Indoor. I'll be doing a couple weekly pieces for them, including my Beyond the Box feature, which is kind of like a interesting in-depth look into a player's achievements in the league, but also a lot of times tying into their off-the-floor things that they're involved in, and telling their story a little bit more. Also just hopped on with Lacrosse Culture Daily, Jonathan Donville's, and a couple other NLL guys, their project is going to be doing a weekly piece with them. Also, that's where you can find, as well as Spotify and other places, my podcast, the Lacrosse Matrix podcast. New episode dropping again today on November 22nd. The guest is Austin Shanks, so that'll be exciting. He obviously just joined Saskatchewan, so talking to him about that journey. Now, the Lacrosse Matrix podcast, for those of you who don't know, it is a mix of statistical analysis and storytelling and interviewing. So it's driven by numbers. So let's say Austin Shanks had 62 assists last season. What made him so successful? And then you hear the answer or something like that. And then we kind of have a natural conversation, but driven by the numbers. And so it's a different, unique take to that kind of analysis. You can also find player features on NLL, on the National Lacrosse League Players Association website, the NLLPA.com. I also am responsible for doing the NLLPA's Fun Facts, which come out on Fridays. So there's that. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. But But yeah, and then also on social media, I'm revamping my Instagram. So that's Adam_Levy_LAX. You'll find really cool, unique NLL content there. I'm going to be taking my own photos and posting them there, finding cool nuggets, quotes, things, probably do some audio stuff as well on there. So that'll be exciting. So it'll be hard to avoid me this NLL season. And, I'd like to say I'm sorry for bothering people like I do, but I hope it's as informative and fun for you guys as it is for me.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, you are at the top of the pile of NLL related follows. So no, it's great. Even as a guy who doesn't, isn't super involved with the NLL, it's been great. I love everything that you have to post and write about it has been great. And I feel like we did well over an hour, and I feel like we could have gone for several more. I feel like there's so many things we didn't even touch on or talk about. So we will probably have to have you back at some point, for sure. And definitely at the end of the season, we got to see if these picks, worked out.
Yeah, I hope they do. I will say, not to brag or pat myself on the back, but there is record that shows that prior to the beginning of last season, my hot take was that Ty Curtis or Alex Simmons would win Rookie of the Year, and Alex Simmons did win, and Ty Curtis came in second. So if that's not an indication of how good I can be with some predictions, I don't know what is.
We won't talk about any ones that went the other direction.
Well, interestingly, most of the predictions that I made went really well, which was very exciting. Actually, we did a Inside Lacrosse NLL Pick'em, and I actually won that as well. So barely edged out. Who did I beat? I'm forgetting who I barely edged out, but I had won by like a game or two. And so that was exciting. Or maybe that was 2 years ago. I don't know. Anyway, what? So I think my predictions are good, and hopefully they do pan out.
Yeah, no. Well, thanks for joining us.
Neil, this has been incredibly awesome, and I promise we will convert you to be an NLL fan, and I'm very excited to track your journey into the NLL and who your team is. So thank you for having me, and it was really great talking.
That is it for this week. A big, huge thank you to Adam for joining me on the show today. We talked on and off air for about 2.5 hours and only really stopped because he had to go record something else. We probably could have talked all day. Like I said, Adam is one of the single greatest sources online for lacrosse content, especially, like I said, for NLL content. So please go and follow him on social media. And if you really want to challenge yourselves, don't forget to sign up to play Preston's Picks at officepooljunkie.com. That is a great, fun thing that Adam is doing. So definitely check it out. But that is it for me this week. I will be back next week with more. So until then, I'll see you later.